bit before the other, which is this enormous volume, Jerusalem Through the Ages, from its beginnings to the Crusades. It was my sabbatical project in 2021-2022. I was planning to write the book during that sabbatical. It turned out that I was able to start it during COVID, which was very fortunate because I could never have written this all in just a sabbatical year, so it took a lot longer. It's a book that I didn't want to write. I talk about this in the preface. There was a very persistent editor at Oxford University Press who badgered me for years, literally, trying to persuade me to write this book, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to do it. Jerusalem's too big, there's too much information, it's infinite, it's a moving target, there's always new discoveries, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he wore me down, and I finally agreed to do it, and we signed a contract. I signed a contract a long time ago that I would write it during that sabbatical year, and it would be due, by a certain date at the end of the sabbatical year. So what I did is and I'll pass this around so that you can look. It was originally supposed to be a trade book, meaning aimed at just a very general readership. It turned out that I got too much into the weeds for it to really be a trade book, at least not for your average American reader. So it's kind of a semi-trade book. So it's actually really good for folks like you who have some background, but not, you're not necessarily specialists. It starts out with an overview chapter, an introductory on the topography and geography and climate and everything of Jerusalem and the various parts of the city and the historical sources. Second chapter is on the explorers, starting with the first explorers, archaeological explorers of Jerusalem, so basically going back to the 19th century, mainly a little bit into the 18th. And then up until 1967 and the years immediately after 1967, so up through sort of relatively recent Israeli exploration of the city. And then I cut it off. I cut it off because I only have dead explorers in here. And the reason I only have dead explorers is because if I included living explorers, I would first of all, it would never end, and I would offend somebody because I left them out. I was like, okay, so somebody would be like, whoa, why didn't you include me? So only dead explorers got included. And in fact, at the very last minute, very sadly, I had to add Eilat Mazar, who died while the book actually was almost finished, and she died very tragically at the age of 64. Anyway, she's in there. She was like the last one. Got her in at the kind of last minute. And then the chapters go sequentially. So it starts with and what I decided to do, because there's so much information on Jerusalem, and it's like if you go through all these dates and all this information, it's just too much to absorb. So I decided as a device to focus every chapter on a specific year in the history of the city, and mostly transitional years, but not necessarily. So for example, 587 BCE, just before Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, what did it look like? Or, during the siege of Jerusalem in 69, just before it's destroyed in 70. Anyway, kind of like that. And in that way, kind of try to help people from getting lost in all of the different dates. And then every chapter is so there's a chapter on Jebusite Jerusalem, so pre-David, and then a chapter on Israelite Jerusalem, David and Solomon, and then a chapter on Judahite Jerusalem, and then it goes on from there, Persian and Hasmonean and Roman. Anyway, that kind of goes on to the Crusades. Now, my original book proposal included the Crusades. By the time I got to the chapter before that, which is early Islamic Jerusalem, where I focused it on the year 800, which is Charlemagne, by the time I got there, my manuscript was 600 pages long. And I don't really do Crusades anyway, so I thought, well, I'm just going to stop it here. This is fine, it's good, And I submitted it to the editor, and then I didn't hear from him for a few months because he hadn't looked at it. And then finally, at the very last minute, he writes back and he says, well, we all decided you have to include the Crusades. So my dig literally was starting that week. We were going into the field and cooking Galilee. I said to the team, I said, look, you guys have to hold down the fort. I'm spending a week in Jerusalem, and I'm going to write the chapter on the Crusades. So I literally did it in a week. We got up to the Crusades, because he's like, we all decided that if it doesn't have Crusades in the title, it won't sell. So there's Crusades. It goes up to the Crusades, and actually it was kind of fun learning about the Crusades. And then I have a little epilogue about Allenby's entrance to Jerusalem in 1917, and that kind of wraps it up and ties it up, because the British public saw Allenby's entrance into Jerusalem as kind of the culmination of the Crusades. So there's it kind of ties in with that. So anyway, it was a bear to write. It was really a bear to write. There was a lot of information in it. And I was in Jerusalem in May and June, and it's already outdated because there's already new discoveries that, you know, are gonna cause me to have to modify some of the things that are in here. And my editor was like, well, are you gonna do it? And I was like, well, I think we should wait a while. But anyway, so there it is. I'll pass it around. You can take a look. It's also available through Amazon and so on and so forth. Now, coincidentally, the second book, which you see is not really as nearly as heavy. So this is the publication of the Schweitz Lectures. So if you're not familiar, there's a very prestigious series of lectures in biblical archaeology at the British Academy called the Schweitz Lectures. And I think they have them every couple of years, something like that. And it's like a big deal to be invited to give the Schweitz Lectures. So you go to the British Academy and you give a series of 3 lectures, and then they publish them. And so I was invited a few years ago to give the 2022 Schweitz Lectures at the British Academy. So I went. All of this is happening like as COVID is, you know, we're still kind of pulling out of COVID days and everything like that. And so I gave the lectures, and then you're supposed to publish them. Well, my first lecture is the first chapter. My second lecture is the second chapter. But then I have 2 other chapters that were not lectures that I gave. My third lecture at the British Academy was on my dig at Bukoke and our fabulous mosaics. But I said to them, I said, I can't publish this in the Schweitz Lectures because I have a team of people who work with me and they deserve the right to publish the material, not me and my name alone. So I have 2 chapters in here which are really, so the first chapter anybody can read and understand. The second chapter anybody can read and understand. First chapter is kind of an overview of ancient synagogues in Palestine. Second chapter, the historiography of the study of ancient synagogues in Palestine, which by the way is really interesting because it's connected with the early Zionist movement. So anyway, very interesting. But the third and fourth chapters, unless you're a real nitty-gritty field archaeologist, you will not appreciate them because they're really, really detailed analyses of 2 different archaeological sites, and it's a whole thing about the dating and how that relates to the whole. Anyway, there's a whole thing here about typology in ancient synagogues. I won't bore you with it. But then what happened is, so I submitted this to them. So you're supposed to like submit and publish. So I wrote it up and I submitted it to them. And usually when you write a book, you know, a book manuscript, and you submit it to the publisher, they send it out for external review, and then you get it back with comments from the external reviewers, and you address them, and then you send it back for another, you know, and then they send you rough proofs, and then you get the final proofs. Well, at some point, they sent me that all I got were final proofs. I mean, they went directly from what I wrote, what I submitted to them, to final proofs. And it freaked me out. It still freaks me out, actually. Because it does, because it's like, I didn't get like, I mean, I would like, you know, I mean, I would like to know, are there things in here that are really off that I should have printed, that whatever, and, well, whatever, now it's in print. And maybe because they figured that it's the Schweitz Lectures, and then they didn't have like a copy editor either. It just went to final proofs. So it was up to me to go through the final proofs and make any corrections that needed to be made. And of course, you never catch all of that. You know, you never catch all of that. So, I mean, all of this to say, this is what it is. It is what it is. It's the Schweitz Lectures. It's very prestigious, and that's how it came out. And I am happy that it's out. But you know, I would have enjoyed having more input along the way. I guess they figure because you gave it as lecture, it's okay. But anyway, so I'll pass that around as well. We'll start it over here. Yeah, thank you very much. Anyway, yeah.